I'm going to get started. I want to point out that I titled this one, usually I just call it Update on Work Trends or the Quarterly Update, which we've now been doing, Ron, since May of 2021. I called it The Great Displacement because a couple of weeks ago, as I was thinking about what's going on, I'm working with so many people who are victims of the firing chaos, the grants termination, the chaos. I happened to see last week for a Forbes article has been defining sort of last quarter and maybe I guess going into this quarter, because I think it was a January article on the great hesitation, meaning people aren't leaving their jobs. They're holding on. They're thinking about it, but holding on. But you'll see why I'm calling it the great displacement. Let me tell you what the takeaway is, which is the great displacement does not mean that you can't stay relevant. And those of you who've been here before know that we focus on making sure you get the information you need to take control and stay in control of your professional development. I have a Slido poll, or you can just stick it in the chat. The Slido's anonymous. I was just curious if anybody had a different name for what the turmoil we're going through on top of the difficult job seeking situation of the last year. If anybody wants to put it in the chat or in Slido, I know not everybody can open up Slido easily. Besides the great displacement or great hesitation, I'm happy to give you credit for the title you're choosing. I think I'll probably write a brief post about this on LinkedIn. I know that this time is a time that many people come to listen. This is your lean back and listen and learn time. So I do try to make it interactive. Collapse the values that define the job industry. I love that, Nilüfer. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, the great collapse, the great values collapse.
I think that it's just what's happening, of course, with USAID and with others, and even healthcare and education, all of these things that we consider as foundation, or even inclusion, all of them are being questioned to the total annihilation.
Yeah.
I think it's just so fundamental what's happening. It's not a trend, I think. I don't
No,
know.
it's unfortunately deeper seated, as we saw during COVID with public health. All right, let me show you how we're going to get there today. We're going to talk about what's new in this quarter, what's happened since December when we last talked about it, and look at beyond 2025 because we're already well into 2025. And we always end for mentor time, we always end with what should you do, meaning how can you take this learning forward? So let's get started as what's new. Here's the things I'm hearing from people. I think it's useful to remind you of these things. Networking is harder because everyone I know is unemployed. And this is hard because you're hearing more and more about you should be networking, you have to network your way into a job, whatever reason people talk about networking. And it's very important, it's very easy to do. But a lot of your friends, companions, colleagues, spouses, family, whatever, they're all going through the same thing. And that makes it much harder for you. I'm not getting interviews when I apply. This has been an ongoing challenge for the last year, especially. And I'm also hearing there are no senior jobs for me. I'm applying below my expertise level. I have people I know who are very well known in certain areas of training for online visibility who've had to start driving for Uber and Lyft in their regional area because they don't have the business they used to have. So let's look first. Usually I do the larger job situation, but I want to talk about specific job seeking changes because I think it's important. The US federal firings have caused not only a ripple around the world in foreign assistance, but there's a personal, I quote from him often, Hung Lee, who's a global talent expert, talent acquisition, who has a weekly or more so podcast. He's already had 2 podcasts on the effect of what's happening in the United States with he didn't call it this, but the chaotic way that these firings are happening. The latest numbers I found were a late February article that compiled these from different sources. So I'm just quoting the big numbers to you. They're estimating 200,000 federal workers at more than a dozen agencies have already lost their jobs. And then an additional 75 took the buyout that was initially offered, that it's not clear that's going to actually stick in terms of the federal government's HR regulations. Thousands, there's no estimate at DHS of the NIH and FDA job losses. And some of those aren't necessarily job losses, but with the grant terminations, 400 happened immediately. 950 more just are now being flagged to be terminated. That's a huge number of people that's affected. It's not just the PI, it's the laboratories, the hospitals where they're doing clinical trials. On to CDC, 1,300 initially, what they call probationary workers. Those aren't just new employees, they're employees who've gotten promotions and who have a year of probation, are eliminated, and more are coming, is what I hear from friends at CDC. USAID, over 10,000. Now, 3 or 4 weeks ago, Wayne Vota, VOTA, who's been tracking this and has developed a career pivot, a whole area of support to those who were part of these public health firings, said that there's over 17,000 people directly affected from the USAID firings and over 5,000 contracts terminated already. On to now Department of Education. That's our smallest cabinet department. I didn't know that till I read this article. But they've already fired half of their staff, which will be a challenge for us to get kids educated all around the country. Department of Energy has already lost 2,000 people. Department of Homeland Security, which I didn't think they'd do any cuts, they've cut 400, and half of those are from FEMA. And that's going to be a problem with hurricanes and floods and natural disasters that FEMA helps in. Department of Energy, 2,000, and Department of the Interior is 2,300, including the Bureau of Land Management. And this is not even all of the agencies. These are just big numbers that I found. So we have a lot of people on the job market, and it's not just in the DC, Baltimore, Virginia area where a lot of these agencies are concentrated. Many of them have regional offices, so there are cuts all over the country of people suddenly, literally with 1, 2, 3 days of termination notices that have lost their jobs. Let's look at the big employment situation. This is where I summarize my Google Lit review for you all. I go through literature for 3 months and I save things that I think are important to talk about. This one struck me. It was a recent article from Fast Company that said a third of workers are sabotaging AI at their company because of fears, denial of AI's role in what they're doing. There wasn't a whole lot of detail here. But also that Gen Z had an even higher rate of sabotaging. I don't know exactly how they counted this, but they did interview executives who said, we are worried because we're finding our staff are not, I'm calling it, being recalcitrant, that the staff aren't wanting to use AI. In what kind, in what way? Not really clear, not sure of the level, but interesting nevertheless. And then Chris Penn, who sends out this weekly newsletter called Almost Timely News, who's really good on keeping up on trends, as well as he's a real AI marketing expert. The World Economic Forum put out a report. They do this every year. Less than half of tasks that people do at work are human-only tasks, meaning they're done totally by a human. And in 5 years, 5 years, that's going to go down to 1/3 from almost half. And where's the increase coming into? AI will be having a huge increase in terms of machine only is the AI part of it. The report defined these 5 task areas plus agentic AI, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Interesting that skills involving reading, writing, and mathematics, and probably even a larger world of mathematics. But the other one that struck me was the systems thinking, because I'm not sure how they define systems thinking. I think I know from reading it what they mean by it, but it's interesting to me that's something that can be taken over by generative AI. Chris also cited a National University of Singapore report on the impact of AI on the freelance market. And Singapore has a lot of freelancers, and they've made it possible for people to do that kind of work there. And again, in 5 years, 2/5 of all of us and our existing skill sets will be transformed or outdated. Transformed is outdated as far as I'm concerned. So we have all these signals of things we've been hearing about for a couple years. In fact, the last time we talked about AI in Mentor Time, when I look back at it last week, it was almost a year ago that I brought it up in terms of where are we seeing the indications, what do we need to be prepared for? So let's talk about beyond 2025. We're still in 2025, but JobScan came out with a report. And I will tell you, it's really unfortunate the colors they chose. Their fonts are too light, even in a large image, and the images are pretty decent, but they're still difficult to read. This first graph shows the job seekers' confidence in finding a role. Less than 20% of job seekers feel confident, and almost half have not had an interview in the last month. And I'm willing to bet even the last 3 months would be around the same from what I'm hearing from people. Challenges, we've heard over and over again, job seeking is going on longer than a year now. Some people are into 2+ years. And equally as important, they're having problems finding jobs that fit their qualifications. And I'm hearing this again from people in the course, that the professional presence course, where we work with people on making sure they're ready to be visible virtually, but also from all of you when you come here or to office hours. They talked about things that they saw that were helpful. And this is one that I want to rephrase because I know I've not been exactly specific on this. So, about a year and a half ago, I started recommending what's been done more commonly in the US market than the global market, which is to put your preferred job title on the top of your resume, just under your heading or just under your summary bio para. And the JobScan quote here is, if you had the job title for the work you're applying for, meaning the exact job title, you had an interview rate 10 times higher than those who did not. So that's a lesson for me and a lesson for all of you. When you tailor your resume, you've got to put the exact job title that they're looking for, not the job title as you describe yourself. Interestingly enough, I know people don't love cover letters, and we know the statistics. One-third of companies want them. One-third of companies say they're optional, and one-third of companies don't ask for them. And we always tell people, if you have the chance, write one and submit it, even if you have to attach it at the end of the PDF of your resume to submit it. Having a cover letter increased interview rates by 3.4 times, 3 times as much, because I suspect cover letters allow you to summarize in a cohesive experience, similar experience way, the highlights of what you bring to them in the job instead of going in the reverse cron order on our resume. An optimized LinkedIn profile, and we have in step 4 in our course shown you the important things that get you on the map and get you starting to be optimized. Having a profile and then using it led to twice as many interviews in terms of the interview rate. So those two are important. Recruiters are using the ATS most firstly, mostly 76%, to search for skills. Before they look for anything else, they look to see if there's a skills match between what they need to recruit you for and what you have in your resume. And they're using, not surprisingly, the ATS for that. I was shocked to find out that LinkedIn searches have surpassed everything else that recruiters do. Now, I'm sure this is recruiters who pay for Sales Navigator or their fancier $2,000 a month thing that you pay for to be able to get into the candidates of over 1 billion people that are in the LinkedIn database. But this far outweighs any other place that they're sourcing them from. Their go-to stop is LinkedIn. That's why we recommend you have it. We've recommended for years. You have it in your heading information, but you also make sure that everything in the top box and in your about section are going to attract the kinds of searches that you want to be found in. This is the Hung Lee every week recruiting brain food, what is the newsletter that he does. And he summarizes a whole lot of different topics. The first one in last week, just the other day's recruiting brain food, was from a Gartner report. Now, Gartner writes a lot of interesting reports. This talked about 3 strategies for companies: business growth from HR impact, developing a deep bench of change leaders. And the one that struck me was creating a future-ready workforce, because I saw this also in a couple other articles I read. So what they're trying to focus on is those people, companies that have a workforce. They're trying to look ahead to see, what do I need from the workforce that I'm not going to get from AI, for example. And then agentic AI, I mentioned this a few minutes ago. It's so interesting. I was thinking this morning, driving to the dentist of all places, agentic, did they just take agent, like customer service agent or telephone agent, and add IC to it? Or is it some Latin derivation? I haven't looked it up yet. But that's what's being called, that becomes the AI that can function on behalf of a human, instead of a human, but in the way that a human would have acted. And Deloitte apparently spent a ton of time developing Zora AI and just announced this. And it says, ready to deploy agents, plural, that perceive, reason, and act. For me, it's that make sure you get the information out there so people do the business transaction you want them to do. And then the bottom is the section from Hung's newsletter. If you wanted to go look at it, the references are in there. So agentic AI, we're going to be hearing more and more about. We're already interacting with a lot of them when we call customer service or we're on with the chats. Do you need help on this article that Amazon wants you to purchase? Get with our chat folks and we'll tell you exactly what you ask, but they don't always tell me what I want to know. All right. We're continuing to hear over and over again, and we talked about this a few months ago. Most of you will not be employees in the future. You will be having a consulting business. You will be having multiple sequential, in parallel, whatever contracts. You may have fractional roles. This seems to be going larger than what it originally came into being. Fractional roles were for C-suite employees, for small businesses who didn't need a full-time CEO or CIO or CFO. So all of these things will continue to be ways that you all will be carrying out your careers as your careers shift, but it also brings with it, as we've talked about before, you needing to be comfortable running a small business. And it's not just, oh, let me go consult for this company. It's having everything in place that you need to have, from overhead rates to approval to take in business and all of those things. All right. Nilüfer, will get to your question at the end when we open it up for discussion. So what should you do? I need you to take a look at the closer horizon. I get a lot of people telling me, Sue, I've been doing this for 20 years and I decided I should take time off and figure out what I want to do in life. And right now, a 5-year horizon may not be the best place to start. So I want to give you some things you can do that will get you moved along in the near horizon so that you are making progress every day in your job search, your job change, your grad school application, whatever. We're going to start with making sure you understand how much you can now look at yourself in a 360-degree view and also then use that to tell your story. For many years, I've recommended check your vanity search, Google yourself every 6 months, and make sure if you're active on LinkedIn, you should be. If you have a LinkedIn profile and you're somewhat active, you will definitely fall probably in the top 10, unless there's other things you are doing that will supersede this. So this was my vanity search yesterday. I still come in the top 10, and actually my LinkedIn is number one. It isn't always, but it also picks up other things. I have other social media accounts. At the bottom, it shows some videos I've spoken on that are on YouTube and other places. So this is how we used to figure out what are people seeing about us, LinkedIn, our resume, and oh, they're going to Google you and have for many decades. We're now at a point where AI is going to help you in your professional brand. And I want to make sure you understand there are two components to AI and your career. On the left is AI when you use it in your technical work. For example, data and analyses. I use them for analyzing people's feedback in the course for each step, trying to figure out where the commonalities are, what people are needing me to change, and AI certainly helps me with that. The other part of it is how you're using it for those of you who are job searching right now or contemplating a job change. How are you using it in what I call your career progress? I was interested to see a LinkedIn posting from Jan Tegzi, I think is how he pronounces his last name. And he said, you should go out there and use this prompt and figure out what AI knows about you. And what he was saying is you can determine how much they've already scraped about you. Now, I did this on 3 different ones, ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. Claude said, oh, I can't, that's private information. The other 2 had no problem building from my LinkedIn. I had some Insta stuff, I've had Threads, I had Twitter before that. There's a lot out there on me. And it wasn't very helpful. It was interesting to know, but it was pretty vague. And it was nothing that was different or dramatic. But what I want to mention, and some of you know about this because we've talked about it before, or I've talked about it individually, is the 360-degree view comes from you having a portfolio of yourself. And that came last fall when Google unveiled, or actually made ready for everybody else to use it. It had been a special project for 2 years, what they're calling Notebook LM, which embraces your ability to not just go to ChatGPT and say, please look at my resume and tell me whether or not I need to make any changes. And then you put your resume in. Now I'm giving you the job posting because it's all very limited if you're like me and you use the free versions. You are more than your resume. You are your LinkedIn profile, your cover letters, things you've written, things you've presented, places you've been interviewed. All of these things help you have a portfolio. And in fact, this is what it looks like. Now, this is one portfolio, one part of what I've done on Notebook LM, because I'm using it also for teaching about AI and portfolios. But here's mine. I've got in my LinkedIn profile, my CV, my long CV. I have one job posting in there, and I put in a couple YouTube video links. I stacked the deck. They're all showing things that I talk about with evidence, but then I also put in a 10-year-old presentation that was made on some work in South Africa. And immediately it tells you, here's the materials, here's what we're seeing. It gives you a little bit of information. But here's the value of it. You can add up to 50 documents, and they can be very long. You can go on and on. I have not stacked mine with everything, but I will eventually. You can then choose your sources. It doesn't have to use all the sources. So you see here, I said, take my LinkedIn profile and my long CV. And I asked it, as you can see on the bottom right, to tell me what my skills and expertise is. It was no big surprise, but it organized it in a way that I thought, oh, this is interesting, thinking about how other people will use it. There is information coming in there that I hadn't thought about. So interpersonal and relationship building, I know I do it. It just never dawned on me. That's evident. It is evident, and I'm sure, in my LinkedIn profile. And then you use it for more insights. This one job posting at Pew Research Center, a very senior researcher job. And I said, okay, tell me what the 10 transferable skills are. Could I have done this myself? Sure. We've all done it in the past by ourselves, but now I can get a jump start on it. It tells me exactly what they're looking for and gives me phrases of what's in the job posting so that when I go to write something, I know that those phrases should be either identical or something similar, especially in my cover letter or in my resume. Even more detail, I said, okay, now compare it to my LinkedIn and my CV and tell me what are the top 5 transferable skills Sue has compared to the important tasks. And it gave 5 important tasks for the Pew Center work. And then it said, here's Sue's skills and where she has them. Now, this is where you have to be careful. I read that job posting, and they need someone who has a lot more data statistical analyses experience than I ever had, even going through grad school. They want a lot. When at the bottom you can see it says Sue has expertise in research and evaluation, strong foundation in research methodologies. That's not exactly what the job posting had, but it's useful to think about that. And then more power when I put in, this was a different portfolio, I put in 10 different job postings, mid-level and senior level. And I asked them to look at all the jobs and tell me the 5 transferable skills that every job had and where. And there you can see this exactly. Oh, for communication skills, written and verbal, Medicaid health plan compliance manager needs to have the ability to write reports and may conduct interviews. So it helps you take things apart and think, oh, where did that come from? Now we don't have to remember those things. So the beauty of this portfolio approach, again, takes away all the grunge work, the work that you don't like to sit down and do and analyze, and helps you get a boost up in terms of tailoring your resume to what they really need, your cover letter to how you tell your story to be effective in the job. And this is just scratching the surface of all the things you can do. I want to make sure that I am reflecting again something I brought up several months ago, and I'm still not seeing it happening in the people that I see on LinkedIn and in the people that are applying for jobs. But you have got to now start talking about, on the left, how and in what way are you using AI? Now, granted that I have been searching on job postings for this, and the job scan report we saw earlier had this one graph that said increased demand for AI skills. Now, increased demands mean they went from 1 to 3.5% over the last 4 years. Now, 3.5% of job postings mention AI skills. Most of those are people that are engineers that will do development of these AI models that are dealing with AI at its basic level, generative. So I had to, this portfolio view doesn't let you get as much out of job postings or information. So I went to Perplexity, where I do have a pro account because I needed to put in a long document once. So I said, give me job postings that aren't in technology or IT, but mention using AI on the job. And it came up with 4, which was helpful to me. And each one had a responsibility area. So a marketing strategist would use AI-driven tools to analyze customer behavior, to optimize campaigns, or deliver personalized customer experiences. And I also then asked it to give me the actual job postings. There were only 3 out of 4 job postings that specified AI in any way. It's still not coming a lot. But as you all get more comfortable with this, here's the kinds of things. This isn't everything, but I tried to phrase these in terms of the outcomes that AI helps you with. Increased efficiency in work, creating marketing images, ideas for taglines or titles, insights from rapid data analysis, qualitative interviews, quantitative surveys. I told you I do it for the qualitative data that comes out of the week. Each step requires a tracking worksheet for you to tell me what was helpful or not. And some people write good feedback as well. You might use it for keeping distributed teams updated, because you could summarize 5 regional meetings that happen every month and let everybody around the team, no matter where they are, realize what progress each team is making and then how they're making it overall for the company. Or deriving insights from a body of work. For example, foundations carry portfolios that have grantees that provide work that leads to 1 or 2 big outcomes. Think about how much we can use AI now with grantee reports, with looking at duration of the grants versus when accomplishments are happening, milestones are happening. All of that can be summarized so much more quickly, so you can talk about the successes and decide going forward, are we going to invest more money in this area or not? So those are just a couple things really quickly. And this is a promise I'm making you all, because I need to help by writing some sample scripts for describing AI work within the overall work in your job positions. And so that means I need to go back to some of the people who've taken the course before, who've given us approval to use their actual words and their befores and afters, and be able to then put in, and I used AI for this and this, or I used this tool to do this. Because I was pleasantly surprised when in early February, I quickly put together a webinar on what's happening in job search for people that had lost their jobs suddenly and had not thought they were going to need to find a job ever, or at least for a while. And one of the things that came up is that more people were using AI in their jobs directly than I expected in the world of public health research and global health, because many of our federal agencies a couple of years ago were very skeptical. CDC, for example, can only use AI for literature reviews, at least as of a few months ago with our CDC friend that comes here sometimes. So I want to help you all by writing some sample scripts, but I also want you all to learn to use this approach to get some attention, so you can talk about how comfortable you are in it, not just using it for getting grammar and spelling done, although that's great. If you don't have to pay a copy editor at a job, you say, I can ask AI to put it through ChatGPT and find my errors and make things shorter. Because ultimately you want to get more people viewing more of you in this 360-degree view. So we're back to the takeaway. The great displacement doesn't mean you can't stay relevant. And I would say that what we've talked about today will put you on the front edge again. So I will send these links out in the email when I send out the captioned recording. And I'll stop there and ask Ron for his comments.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. As always, you do a great job in getting organized for this sort of thing, and I think you've covered a lot of really interesting material. I'm going to get retrospective here, and in some ways it sounds familiar. Every decade or less, there is a major shift in something, and there's always a shift from the person to the machine. That's the way I've looked at it. In thesis work I did in the 80s, It was one of the things that I looked at. And so you just see the transfer of things to machinery that the machinery ultimately can do better than the human. And so this has been a thing we've resisted, is the idea that some of our cognitive abilities, some of our intellectual property, and that sort of thing is protected, and because it's a human only thing. And clearly, as AI continues to develop, that's just not the case anymore. And I told you, Sue, about my own experience with AI, where I was humbled. I just for the group, I had an opportunity to use AI, and in about an hour, I generated 7 pages of documentation that would have taken me quite a while to do. I probably would have produced a similar result, but in the end, the AI tool did it. It was a humbling experience, and it also said, "Hey, boy, this is actually quite good." So the challenge, and I think what Sue's pointing at us to, is the tools are the job now. It's always been true, whether it's stats, whether you can use SPS or whatever, it's going to continue to shift. Whether you use a slide rule or a calculator or AI, it doesn't matter. There's a job to be done. And then the employer, they don't care how it gets done, really. So actually, that's not always true, but for the most part, they just want the job to be done well. And they're looking for ways of getting it done inexpensively. And frankly, whether it goes to a machine or a human, in the end, it doesn't matter. So this is where we, as professionals, get an opportunity actually to take charge of our own capacities. And so learn, as Sue's been saying, learn how to make our jobs better, express ourselves. And if in your employment, this is occurring to me now, if in your employment, you actually haven't had a chance to do it, LinkedIn, we keep suggesting you go write an article. So go do something. Do something using AI that's really clever, and then write about it. And you surprise yourself. And so that actually adds to and creates some credibility using a tool that actually has importance. As Sue pointed out to us, LinkedIn's important, and because people pay attention to it, and we can't forget all that. So it sounds dreadful. Sue, what a depressing start to this talk. All the unemployment, and oh golly, dreadful, dreadful, dreadful. And it was awful statistics. However, the value of taking charge of your own career and getting things in the right shape is that you will stand out. The goal is the scroll is the boring statement, but it's so true. So in your documentation that you have, the idea is to make someone intrigued by who you are and what you have done and what you've accomplished on behalf of employers and what you're capable of. And so that's what it's all about. So your CV, your bio pair, whatever it is that you're working, you want to be on the top of the stack. You want to be the one that does get the job. And the way you do it, it sounds like cover letters still matter. The CVs matter, LinkedIn matters, all that stuff. And if you do those things, you increase the likelihood that you're going to be near the top of the inbox, which is where you want to be, because people are busy. Hey, guess what? Oh, they're going to use AI to do the scan, and they're going to figure it out, and they're going to do this and so on. And you want to pop up. And so having popped up to the top, your next job, your next task is to survive the interview process. And of course, that's when you're on your own, provide you guidance. It's how do you express yourself? How do you help them understand you, the person in front of them, how you can actually accomplish the stuff that they need to have accomplished. So anyway, short seminar.
Thank you, Ron. No, that was great. Oh, that was such a great tracing through even of your lesson and all of that. I want to acknowledge Sheila's comment about what she'd call the era of careers we're in right now, the desert era. Lack of funds, lack of opportunities. I love that. And yes, that's why I deliberately switched around, Ron, to start with the worst news. But that's the frame we're all in right now. Nilufar asked, for consulting, we need clients. How to get the clients for whom our skill set is relevant. I'm going to flip that around, and this is not going to sound very different from what we just talked about today, Nilufar. You have to know what it is you're providing in a way that they understand how you solve their problem when they buy your services. And this is the beauty of having LinkedIn. I know not everybody wants to be on social media, and some of the folks that have been through firings or they think their job's going to be cut, who've been in global health, they registered for the course and said, I don't want to use LinkedIn. I don't need to be on social media because they haven't had to be. They've had their own bubble. We have a problem remembering to talk to the other side of the convo. And job searching teaches us that if we don't phrase things the way the person who's got the problem, I need you to do this work, I need to fill a position, if we don't talk to them in a way they can hear that Sue's going to solve your problem, or maybe Sue's not, but Ron will, because Ron's telling us not just I'm great, I'm a great communicator, I'm an excellent writer. Ron is saying, let me tell you about the 3 times that I was able to revamp learning and save the Navy 20 hours each person in training. We didn't need to take so much time training, and it meant we could train more people every year, or whatever it is. So, Nilafar, first you need to figure out what your skill set is, because most of us come to our profile and we can do so much, especially if you've been 10 plus years in your job. You can do this and you do this and you do this. And all of us learn that we do project management, whether we collect data or do policy analysis or implement interventions. Once you figure out what you want to be doing, and part of this is your own figuring it out every day, is then you can decide, okay, who's buying these kinds of things? And again, AI will be very helpful, and so will LinkedIn searches, because LinkedIn actually has a powerful Boolean, if you know the word Boolean, where you can add ands and ors and string together a variety of phrases in that teeny little search box. So if you flip it around and think, okay, yes, I can do policy analysis, I can lead projects, and I'm good at project management, and I also can build client relationships. Maybe you're actually better with client engagement than anything else. People know you around the world for bringing disparate groups together to solve complex health challenges. Maybe that's what you start to sell. Because until you can define what you do, you can't use the power of virtual visibility, LinkedIn especially, to get the word out. Ron just mentioned LinkedIn articles. Posting on LinkedIn, commenting on LinkedIn, writing an article. You can write anything you want. It doesn't have to be with thousands of citations. It doesn't have to be earth shaking. All you have to do is read people's newsletters. Nothing's earth shaking. So I'm glad you want to work on the portfolio, and I will send you the recording from the transferable skills workshop I did 2 weeks ago, and last week I did something that I took pieces of and put in here today on AI and your professional brand. And I'll send you information on the course, because that's our 4th step in the course, is now you're ready to get your virtual visibility. But all of those will give you some ideas about how to take it forward. My profile is very full, but you know what? I don't post a lot. I post occasionally when I'm doing a launch, or if I have something to say. And I meant to post last week about a talk I gave at a public health membership club. But I do comment a lot. So I'm known as, I always talk about substantive commenting. So thank you, Nilafar, for coming. And motivated to work on your LinkedIn portfolio is that exactly what you need to do, but use some AI help to figure out what it is you want to sell to people's problems that are out there. And as I said, I hope I gave you enough, I know, that you can take forward the learning from today and say, oh yeah, I could look at these 3 job postings and begin to get an idea of not what clients there are, but what do my clients need for the kind of work that I think I want to be doing. Ron, did you have comments?
Yeah, I just went through this exercise, and it's pre-Zoom days. Oh, we lost her. I went through the experience of deciding to go into private consulting because of issues with the job. And I just think back on the tools we have today, which I wish I'd had then. And I would probably still be working. Oh, golly, I hope not. But I might still be keeping my consulting business going, because the tools today make it so much easier to be an entrepreneur, a professional consultant in some way. Just because the AI tools, the Zoom tools, the distance distributed workforce type tools that are available, all of those things make it better for those of us who have skill sets that folks out there need. In other words, they have problems to solve, as you pointed out, and those problems need solutions, and that's where you market into. It's figuring that out. I had lots of clients. Problem was they were in Toronto, Montreal, and I was in Halifax, and I just that was just a difficult thing to do, and I finally pulled the plug on my business just because I didn't want to move, and that was that. But today there's so many extra tools. It's just so wonderful. I love being the workforce. No, not really.
No, you wouldn't. No, you love
Anyway,
working with me
that's
and
right. I do.
and
This
everyone else.
is lovely work. This is
Yeah.
lovely work.
All right, Sheila, do you have any last questions or comments? We thank you for you always stay so late. I know it's late your time in Nairobi.
No, not really comments, but I think from our discussion, it's also time for me to go back to my portfolio and update it.
I looked at your Notion portfolio yesterday because I was trying to think if I wanted, I was going to put it in here, but I couldn't. Great, thank you very much. So Ron, I'm going to ask you to close the meeting.
Yeah, thanks very much. What a great discussion, Sue. Thank you for stimulating our thinking, and I appreciate that. And there will be some who watch this recording, and I'm sorry that you missed it, but we're going to do Mentor Time again, and please join us on our next session. So thanks very much, Sue. Thank you, everyone, for attending.